Hi guys, it's Goldyn P coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia in my driveway. There's a lot going on today and I was getting ready to leave and then I remembered that we have Sunday Sip today. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to recap a couple of different things that I was asked about this week and a couple of things that I spoke about this week in the car, no less, a few days ago. So, to recap, this week has been a lot of headlines about double standards. Most recently, the double standard with Serena Williams in yesterday's U.S. Open match, and her being subsequently fined for speaking out and referring to the umpire as a thief, which, as she stated so eloquently, men have done that all the time. You have professional athletes in the tennis world that have broken their rackets. They have thrown water bottles. They have actually cursed at umpires. And they did not receive anywhere near the punishment that Serena Williams received. She also demanded an apology, which was important. It was important to her, and it was important in her being able to move forward and continue on with the game, and that was understandable. So, of course, today's headlines was quite interesting to read along social media because there were references to her that she may have been suffering from postpartum depression. I saw another inflammatory headline for her outburst being caused by her entitlement, and a whole host of other inflammatory headlines by a lot of respected publications. And it's always interesting to see the headlines for women and the way they react. They're always labeled as hysterical or demanding or, having a sense of entitlement. And that's disturbing for a lot of different reasons. And being a member of the press and the media, I totally get that clickbait is important. But as media, we have a responsibility to make sure that we not only tell the truth in the reporting, but to also provide balance and perspective. And what I noticed about this issue with Serena versus, bench clearing brawls in baseball games and everything, those headlines are not inflammatory. Men are looked at as passionate or really stern. But when it comes to cases with women, and in this case Serena Williams, it's a totally different story. That was yesterday. Earlier this week, there was a report about a well-known TV executive at CBS who was reportedly in final stages of negotiations to receive $100 million as a golden parachute to walk away from his position and his management of that media property along with the subsidiary media properties that he manages. And the reason that he was being offered this, apparently, or according to the reports, was because of the allegations against him of assault, sexual assault, discrimination, retaliation. And there were some very serious allegations that came out earlier in the week by Ronan Farrow, who is a superhero without a cape, who I just bow to him because he is courage under fire and grace under fire. And today, 6 more women came forward, and Ronan had an update to his story that provided some additional context in what those 6 women experienced. There were allegations of forced oral sex, which in itself is a criminal act. Let's just call it for what it is. I'm all about that. It's a criminal act. And that was disturbing, along with holding, retaliation and everything for the women who spoke up and came forward. So earlier this week, when I made my video previously, I spoke about being tired of the double standard. And I saw a headline that sparked that rant, some people may say, or hysteria, that asked the question if it was time to forgive some of the men who have been accused in the Me Too movement. The Me Too movements and the Time's Up movement are important. As you can see, I'm wearing my pen. And in my earlier video, I spoke about how this pen attracts a lot of attention. It's always a conversation starter, and I expect it. But it's also a way for me to show my solidarity for those who have been victimized. And I hate that word, and I despise that word. But those women who have been put through an experience that wasn't necessary, that could have been avoided because of the aggressor's behavior. It's important for us to realize and have the discussion that there is a double standard, and to recognize there is a double standard. The men, the aggressors in these scenarios, they are, how do I want to say this? I'm such a blunt person. I'm trying to be politically correct. According to the reports, they were ostracized once the allegations against them became public. And a lot of attention was put towards and focused on the men and their stature, their celebrity status, their popularity status, things of that nature, and much less on the behavior and the actions they took against the people that they assaulted. That's a problem. The thing I hear most about this Me Too movement, Time's Up movement, and everything is that women are not believed, and a lot of people, and that prevents a lot of women from speaking out. And that's an issue. And there's a double standard, because the men eventually, they are able to go back and lead full lives. They're able to, in most cases, maintain their positions and their salary. They are able to fall out of social graces for temporarily and then be reintroduced into society and to reclaim what has been perceived or what has been perpetuated as a loss. Women, on the other hand, they are thrown under the bus. They're not believed. They are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be retaliated against. So it is a situation where there's a damned if you do and a damned if you don't scenario. I identified with these issues this week that have been reported in the news simply because I myself, although I wasn't assaulted, I had been discriminated against and retaliated against for blowing the whistle against my former employer. And it was due to me witnessing a sexual assault and, complaining about racial discrimination. And watching the women of the Time's Up movement and the Me Too movement speak up motivated me to share my own story. And honestly, it's been one of the best things. It's been one of the scariest things and one of the best things that I've done. And it's been a decision that I did not take lightly and that I did not make easily. But in sharing my own experience, although I'm not a public figure and I'm not a celebrity and I'm not a well-known person, there's a little bit of freedom that comes with sharing your story. And you have to take it with a grain of salt that sometimes you will be believed and sometimes you won't. In my own situation, I faced a lot of rejection. And I knew going into my journey as far as seeking justice and trying to rebuild my reputation from some of the things that were said about me, it was difficult some days. And I identify with those women who have called out their aggressors and called out aggressive behavior in a hostile work environment, because a lot of the stories that they share are similar to my own, even though I personally was not victimized via the sexual assault. someone else was, and I witnessed it. So it is a tremendous, I can't stress enough. It is a tremendous undertaking when you decide to speak out. Most of the time you don't speak out because you're scared to lose your job. You're scared to disrupt the environment, making people feel uncomfortable, even though you yourself was made to feel uncomfortable. I faced a lot of rejection. I lost a lot of relationships. And my credibility was challenged. So if you just think to yourself, if those women were able to take on and speak out and call out their aggressors, and their aggressors are public figures, think about all the women that aren't popular, aren't a celebrity, or consider a nobody, who go through this every day. This week, since I spoke out about my situation, I've been getting more comfortable in sharing my experiences. I have received a lot of feedback, which is positive. There hasn't been a lot of negative feedback. It's been more so questions on how I decided to deal with the issues that I faced. And I've been asked a lot to share advice for women who may be experiencing hostile environments, trying to navigate their way through. I received a question earlier today, as a matter of fact, on a woman that was in a working environment where she was made to feel unsafe by a coworker, and she reported it to HR. And she said that she did not feel that HR cared. I addressed that in my book. In my litigation against my former employer, the case that I've been going through since 2014, we did not have an HR department, but I have been in a situation since then where I've watched other people go to HR and they feel that HR does not take their concerns seriously. And there's a chapter in the book, I believe it's chapter 3, that the title of the chapter is HR is in place to protect the company and not the employee. HR professionals will get upset with me for that chapter and what I discussed in that chapter, because my point wasn't to be anti-HR. It is simply to give the perspective of the employee that comes to HR as a resource, and to give a reality check to the employee on what they should expect, and if they feel like they've run into a brick wall with HR, what they should do. And I give tips and tools and everything, and questions you should ask your HR department, and what you should expect. It's always important to manage your expectations as you go or move throughout your journey through the toxic work environment or the hostile work environment, wherever you find yourself in. And it's important to remain professional. There are a lot of days where you would not want to remain professional, and I get that and I understand that, and I've been there. But it's a process. So having the courage to speak up is important. There are going to be a lot of times where you feel you're alone. There was a Harvard study I read a few months ago while I was preparing different outlines and everything for my book, that talked about how 1 out of 5 women admitted that they experience a hostile work environment, but they just don't talk to anyone about it. Not even family, friends, or confidants, or anybody, much less someone at the company. And a lot of that stems from fear of retaliation. I'm here to tell you that I experienced retaliation. And I was prepared to receive retaliation for calling out the racial discrimination, the the tax issues, the employment tax issues, the sexual assault, and not being paid properly for overtime. One of the things that a lot of people could not believe was that I experienced all of that, those 4 things, while working for a law firm here in Atlanta. And a lot of the feedback that I got from the judges was, well, they're a law firm, they're attorneys. How do they not know, or how do they feel that they can't abide by the law? I had a couple of judges that asked me, if I had made reports or if I had done anything, reported anything about ethics to the State Bar of Georgia. The answer is yes, I did. I reported the situation to the State Bar of Georgia simply because attorneys are held to a code of ethics that a lot of professional people who hold licenses are held accountable for. And because the sexual assault was a criminal issue and a criminal matter, I reported it. State Bar of Georgia got back to me within like 2 weeks and by mail, and mailed me a letter to say that they did not find anything unethical about the situation that took place, and there would be no reprimand. And the only reason why I can talk about that publicly is because the judge in the case asked about it, and the opposing counsel was able to confirm and deny a few things throughout my case in regards to the state bar complaint. And they wanted the judge to silence me on speaking with anybody at the State Bar of Georgia, and they asked the judge to order me not to pursue any further litigation outside of the case that we were litigating. And they agreed. So I did have a criminal complaint against opposing counsel for harassment and for some other things, and I had to swear out a criminal warrant. And once I did, then that was on file and on record, and we did not litigate that issue any further. Again, during litigation and during your journey and your process, there are going to be a lot of things that are going to come up that aren't specific to your case. There can be allegations made. There can be a lot of different things that can come into play. And the person that's going to help you manage that the best is your attorney. In the book, Disruptive, I also talk about how to choose your attorney. And it's not saying this is what you need to look for, or, don't choose this attorney or that attorney. It's simply the questions I give are things you need to ask. So a couple of the questions that I can give you off the top of my head that I include in the book were, what is your success rate? Nobody wants to hire an attorney that's not successful. And so that's one of the questions that you need to ask. The other questions you need to ask are, how long have you been practicing employment law in this case? The other questions may be, what can you expect from the process? You also need to discuss fees, contracts, if you decide to terminate as a client, your attorney. Most people don't know that you can fire your attorney. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on that and why that's important, especially in my case. So I hired an attorney. For one thing, after I got fired, it took me a while to find an attorney here in Atlanta that would be able to represent me, that did not have a conflict with my former employer. So my experience won't be your experience, because attorneys they're hireable. But in my case, there was a lot of conflict with them knowing my former bosses. And so there were a lot of people that declined just out of professional courtesy to my former employer. So it was hard to find an attorney to represent me. I was able to find one. I looked in-state, out-of-state, in the city of Atlanta, outside of the city of Atlanta, and I finally settled on a really great attorney here in Atlanta. And things went okay for a while. And I received a tip from someone that was employed with a law firm. I'm not going to say whether it was with the law firm that I hired or whether it was with someone else's, but they were familiar with my case. And they stated to me that my attorney wasn't doing everything he could do to represent me, and that there was a disservice and there were some things that I wasn't aware of that were taking place. And so once I received that information, I sat on it for a minute, and I just wanted to evaluate my circumstances and what I needed to do, because it took me 2.5 months, 3 months to find an attorney that was willing to take the case. And I knew that if I fired my current attorney, that I would have to start that process all over again or take the case on myself. So there was a conflict that arose that made me decide to go ahead and terminate services of my attorney. Once I did that and I sat around and I evaluated, I thought that being that I have paralegal experience and I'm a researchaholic and I've done a civil lawsuit on my own before, that I could take on this case and no one would be as passionate about my case as I was. So I fired my attorney and I went to move forward to file documents on my own to represent myself. There's a famous saying, anybody who represents themselves in court has a fool for a client. I couldn't agree more. I don't disagree with that. But there are caveats to that. And in my case, I had enough knowledge and awareness of what I needed to do and what steps I needed to take in order to push my case forward. And I had all my evidence. I had audio recordings. I had written emails. I did not have any photographs, but between the audio recordings that I had and the emails that I had, I felt like my evidence was enough to stand on its own, that I would be able to push my case forward. So once I was able to refile my case, I continued on and litigated it on my own. Sometimes you may find yourself in a situation where your attorney and you evaluate your attorney and you're not happy with the results. Attorneys have different clauses in their contracts, so it will be beneficial to you to familiarize yourself with that before you jump to try to fire your attorney. And that's my advice on that. I'm not a lawyer, so double check with that, but there are clauses in there where you will be able, that it should be a paragraph in your attorney contract that references if you all decide to part ways and what the steps would need to be and the procedure that you have to go through, as well as if any money is owed or any fees are owed. It will address it in the contract, so keep that in mind. But if in fact you find yourself not happy with the legal representation you have, that's always an option for you, and you have to weigh that option accordingly and do what's best for you. Before I close this, because we're only spending 30 minutes today, it's just, this week I want my message to be that I wish more people were mindful about the double standards and how they apply, and that the rules aren't the same for everyone. And that could be black or white. It could be male or female. It could be rich or poor. Either way, the rules are not the same for everyone. And I want people to have more compassion and understanding for women who take the step to report their experience or to speak out loud about their experience. There are a lot of people that are internalizing a lot of things, which eventually become bigger because you internalize it. And I want you to be confident that you have resources and tools available to you that you can take advantage of. And if you are going through a situation where you're in fear of retaliation, there are tools and steps that you can take in order to protect yourself. And you would just need to document everything to protect yourself, making sure you have the proof of everything. You can go to HR. Go to HR, report it. I prefer that people send HR an email just so you can have your own copy of what you said in writing in case it becomes an issue later. So that's my tip of the week. If you go to HR, It's fine for you to go to HR. HR is not the enemy per se, but it's important for you to be able to document what your conversation was with HR. So my preferred method of contact would be to send an email, document everything, spell it all the way out, write it all out in one email. Send it to HR, let them respond back to you. They may call you into the office in order to have you speak with them face to face about your issues. And then at that time, you can ask the questions you need to just understand the process better and the grievance procedure better. So questions you need to keep in mind when you do go to HR and when they do respond to your inquiry would be, how long does this process take? What all do you require from me? Will I eventually have to come back into contact with the individual that that I have the issue with? What are my options? Things like that. So you want to know what the options are available to you. Every company is different, and every company handles things differently. But the initial step that you need to do is to make sure that you document it. And document it by sending an email with a time and date stamp, and then allow them 5 days or so to get back with you. And then if you haven't heard anything, follow up by email and save that documentation, because you may need it. Not everyone that has issues at work end up litigating against their employer like I had to do. That's a decision that you have to make once you have pretty much exhausted all your other options. So once you do that, let the process take its course. Remember, it is a process. Remember that it's okay to feel the way you feel, but always remain professional. And don't fear retaliation. Just don't, because that's another added stress that you don't need. And whatever is meant to happen is going to happen the way it's supposed to happen. So keep that in mind. Thank you for joining me for Sunday Sip. I feel like a chatterbox. I hope I didn't say too many times. But thank you so much for joining me on Sunday Sip. If you have questions or concerns or needs advice, I'm not a legal professional. I don't work in the legal industry anymore. But I'm more than happy to give you steps on what I would do to in your situation, and then give you some tools and resources to consider, and then let you make your own decision. So feel free to reach out to me. Please, 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 if you buy the book on Amazon or on Barnes and Nobles, I need to have reviews, and good, bad, or ugly. So whatever review that you have or whatever feedback you have, I'm willing to take it and willing to accept it. Also, really quick, thank you so much to everyone who has already purchased a book. We have readers Disruptive has readers now in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, America, North America, and Canada. So thank you so much. And if you ever need any assistance, then please reach out to me. I am reviewing speaker opportunities right now, and coaching opportunities and consulting opportunities. And also, I'm in talks with trying to figure out a book tour or book signing. So stay tuned for news, and join me here back next Sunday for Sunday Sip with Goldyn P. Smith, talking everything disruptive and the crazy news during the week that struck a chord. Thank you so much. See you next Sunday.